So again, welcome to the October program. I will introduce our Learn and Grow speaker in a moment. But again, I think if anybody's new, if you would please silence your phone. I also want to welcome our online audience at this point because many people watch online all across the country. And we really appreciate the work that Michigan Media does to present a really polished program for people that are watching from home and from warmer climates. So with that, I would like to introduce Janet Macunovich. Janet presented during COVID, so some of you maybe have watched her presentation that we did on container gardening, because during COVID we thought that would be a fun thing to do. Today she's going to be talking about winter gardening. And for those of you that don't know her, Janet and Steve, her husband Steve, own a landscaping nursery business, very involved in the community. She's published many books on gardening, perennial gardening, trees, any number of things, all available on Amazon. So check it out afterward. And I think today she's going to discuss winter gardens and a perfect quote, and she actually has a whole page of her quotes online, which is really a credit. But her quote was, "Plan your garden not from the outside, but from looking outside from inside." And I think many of her gardening tips today are also going to be about your winter garden and keeping it looking lovely all winter, as well as preparing it for winter, and then of course waiting for things to grow in the spring. There are handouts on the table, but I will also say that all of her handouts are going to be online, as will this presentation. So if you missed something, please feel free to just check it out on the YouTube. Thank you. Janet.
Thank you very much. I'm assuming there are some gardeners in the audience, and I'm assuming there are some people who were dragged along with a gardener, because that's kind of the way that it works. There are the people in the neighborhood who wonder who those people are who are crawling around out in the yard, and then there are the ones that don't even look at the people who don't know what they're doing out there. I'm going to try to talk to both of you, because everything that I'm going to talk about, which I title The Art of Fall Garden Cleanup, is something that I've been doing all of my life and 40 years professionally, although now I'm retired, and like you know that means that you're just busier than you were before doing the same things you love doing. My husband, Steve Nicolai, is the photographer. I'm the one that sticks my nose in things and does the research and the writing most of the time. We have a website, gardenatz.org, where we've been putting our articles that we've written for the last 35 years so that we can write new things all the time. So we appreciate any input that anyone ever has, emails, any contact, questions that we can look into. The notes that are on the table that you have today are notes that we put up on the website. So I'm going to start with, in sequence, what we do when we're winterizing a garden. Winterizing is a terrible term because that's not really what's going on, but it's the work that we do in the winter. I read an article about pockets, and I was very glad to see an article about pockets, because women's clothes do not have pockets. Women's clothes have 4 pockets for every 7 pockets of men. And something needs to be done about this. I have many pockets on my work pants when I'm outside. So I'm going to go in sequence, the things that we do to close up a garden, and we don't really close it up. We make it something that continues through the year, because it's a long time between November and March, end of March. So what I'm going to be talking about, and it's a lot of things. I'm going to speak quickly. I'm going to show you a lot of pictures. I figure you can look online if you want to catch back up with it. The most important things are the first things to do. If you have a limited amount of time, or you have a limited amount of people to help you do things, have them work on the first couple things that are on the list, if you possibly can. So I tell people, start thinking about closing up your garden now while it still looks good and things are still beautiful. Now is the time to think about doing it and to skinny things down. By the time the leaves start to fall, what you want to do is be done and let the leaves fall and stay the heck down on the ground. There's enough of getting rid of leaves. We've been doing unsustainable gardening for many generations now in the United States. We've been taking things out of the landscape and not putting back in, and those leaves need to go back in. So I tell people, try to be done and let those leaves be the icing on the cake. If it gets like this, before there's quite often the gardening books would tell you, after the hard frost you can cut things down. That's nonsense. After the hard frost, we don't go outside. We look outside and go, oh no, it's too cold out there. And things go quickly when that killing frost hits. Your fall crocus looked good, and then they don't the next day. So if you don't cut it when it's one of those 60-degree, wonderful October days, it's going to end up being winter before you know it. And then there's something that kicks in. I don't know if it's a hormone or what it is, but we do not get up and get out after that. Even though we know it's going to melt, we know that there's going to be an Indian summer, and that's probably an apolitical term now, but I've not heard a new one for it. But there are going to be those beautiful days later on, and we don't take advantage. So I'm out there often with 4 layers on, working in the snow. Why not? So why don't wait till spring? People say, I'll just do it in the spring. Don't wait till spring. Spring is sloppier to work in, and it's more urgent. Everything is growing up. If you get done at the end of the day and go inside, when you come back out, everything has taken up more room in the garden. You have to do more standing on one foot, you know, the old yoga position in the garden. There's also a lot of seeds out there right now. And everything that I'm saying about a garden applies to lawns, applies to those ground cover areas you've got underneath trees and shrubs. If we leave the seeds there, then they're just going to germinate, many of them now, and many of them well before we get out there in the spring. You'll get out in the spring, things are already gone to seed again, those what we call winter weeds. So it's less stressful overall to work in the fall. There is a look at nature, kind of a religion that says that the earth gives up its energy in the spring. It flows out of the earth and up into the atmosphere and into the sky, and in the fall it comes back down. And as gardeners, I want to be in line with all of that energy coming up and down. And that's the time to do it, is in the fall, when all that energy is coming back down in and you're picking it up. Plus, in the spring, if it comes back up through the debris, I was talking to a gardener, and we were in England, in York, and the head gardener of an estate was walking around with us. And I said, well, you don't cut down your miscanthus in the fall. He says, oh, no, we do. I said, well, that one, he said, yeah, we didn't get to it. I said, so what are you going to do now? He said, nothing. I'm going to let it grow back up through because it's too hard to fight with that stuff. So once they start growing, it's too hard to fight with things. So nice day when the shadows are long, before the leaves have come down. And when the leaves do come down, if you have to work in a garden when the leaves come down, you do the same thing as in a lawn. You rake the leaves to one side, work the area that you just raked, then rake the leaves back over that area. Leave them there. We'll get into that more. If you have a shredder, shred things up. They decompose much more quickly when they're shredded up, a lot more surface area that way. We have a shredder, and my husband just loves working the shredder. I don't want you to do this to yourself, though. I don't want you to have the scene that you saw out your window looking so wonderful all year suddenly look like a moonscape with little grave markers sitting up and all over through it. Because that's what can happen, especially if you do it all in one weekend. Not only does your back hurt then, but your eyes are offended, and your senses are offended all the way around. I would rather take and do this like we do at my client's landscape. It's designed to have things that are left up so that there's something there that's of interest. And I spent some time in New Orleans when my brother lived down there, which was very interesting. It's quite a different place. And I was there during Mardi Gras. We were having dinner, sitting across the table from people that we hadn't met before. And my husband and I and a friend that was there were talking about what we'd seen in the landscape. And I was talking about a tree, and my husband was waxing eloquent about how beautiful the bark was on the tree. And then I realized that the man across from me was sitting with his mouth open, agape. I said, oh, I'm so sorry we get involved in the gardening thing. He says, no, go on, he said. Y'all must have a really long winter. And it's true, we do. We say, oh, I love how that turns a particular color brown, that there's a difference between this brown and the brown of the hydrangea over there, and here's this guy, listening to this going on. But that's what we live with. So I don't want you to do that to yourself all at once. I want you to go out on a cool day and say, well, right now I can take down that stuff. And I've taken down a little bit. And then I take down another wheelbarrow load and go dump that in the back. And then I come back out another week later and take down another wheelbarrow load and gradually skinny it down to the things that look good in the winter or look good in the late fall. And there is the possibility of doing that if you just think in terms of doing it in sequence. Now the questions, when I talked to Catherine about this, we would hold questions until the end. Mm-hmm. But if you have a question as I'm going along, if you can make yourself some kind of note in front of yours, because I forget as soon as I thought about it, I forgot what I was going to Google, right? I said, what was it? I woke up this morning, I turned to my husband, I said, what was it I was going to Google last night that I said, we'll do that in the morning, Yeah. So make yourself a note because we want to talk about these things. Okay, the first thing I do is what I just showed you. Go out and cut things down. And I do most of my cutting by hand. Maybe that's why I've got the tremors that I've got from doing that work for a long time, but for me, it's the best way to do it. My husband has a lot more experience than I do with a string trimmer cutting things down. We have raced, not where we get up and go and grab your canoe and put it over your head and launch the canoe and the whole bit. We've said, okay, we're going to start right now. I'm going to cut down this area. You're going to cut down that area. They're each 50 square feet. Let's see what happens. It doesn't save time to cut with a string trimmer. It does save some energy, and you don't have to get up and down as much. I crawl. I stay down. Once down, I'm down. I have knee pads built in my pads. I just keep on crawling. But when you cut with a string trimmer, things fall over, sometimes by the weight of what was cut onto what has not been cut yet. So when you go to clean it up, you still have to go in there and cut more stuff. So if you add those times together, you don't save time, but you do save the getting up and down. I cut everything that's low and wobbly can go down. Don't ask questions about, can I cut my stilbe? Can I cut my hosta? Can I cut my pulmonaria? Can I cut those daisies? Don't ask those questions. If it's wobbly, if it's going to die before next spring, you can cut it down. Nature would cut it down in a minute. If it's frost, if there's a freezing, killing frost overnight, it's gone. So what does it matter if you cut it down? And there's good reasons to cut things down. You can do things like hostas and I just do those with shears and just chop the whole thing down. Daylilies, which I've usually cut down a couple times during the year, just chop the whole things down. There were daylilies there, and there's no daylilies now. We've just raked them out. There's good reasons to cut things down and clean stuff up. Or you can do the ditzy stuff where you just deadhead things and keep them going. Doesn't matter, but cut things first. So in this garden, I garden at the Waterford Township Library is one of my volunteer projects. And in this garden, we're gradually cutting things down. You might be able to see the space up here. Some of the annuals didn't look good anymore. Some of the goat's beard were getting brown. Cut it down. If it's brown, cut it down. That's what I tell people. If it's not adding to the picture, then it's detracting, my husband, the photographer, says. So we take things down. And so you can take that, anything that's like this. This is sea lavender. And the leaves will be almost evergreen. People will say, well, but they're still green in February. But if you cut them off now, it doesn't care. Or you can just clean them up and take off the bad leaves. Whatever you do, cut as low as you possibly can. They say leave stubble up because it keeps the leaves. The littlest bit of rough ground keeps leaves in place. You don't have to have big stubble up there and go in and cut things twice. I would rather cut the whole thing down. Still looking good, still got a few flowers on it, too bad. I cut it down. Say, you know what? I didn't put you there to flower in November. You're down. You're gone. You're out of here. So I cut all those things down, and don't cut the evergreens. If you're going to cut evergreens, just trim them. This is thyme. I'm just trimming it back, giving it a brush cut. You wouldn't want to cut the weeping red pine or the euonymus, but you can trim them a little bit, the pieces that are straggly and sticking up with it you want to use for decorations come holiday season. Put them in a plastic bag, put them in the cold garage, let them sit on the concrete floor. They'll last until Christmas. They'll last better than the Christmas trees that they've already got cut now for Christmas time. So snow and summer, which is cerastium. Many of the ground cover sedums are evergreen. That's thyme and sedum. Bergenia or pig squeak. It's a great plant. It's put out there in order to have some winter interest. It's evergreen and going to be green until next spring when the new leaves come, so leave it out there. If you're not sure, cut it. If you're not sure if it's evergreen or not, cut it to 5 or 6 inches tall. At least get some of the debris out of the way. So this Monarda, you can cut it all the way to the ground, but if you're not sure, you could cut it to 5 or 6 inches and you get most of the green out of there. But I'm cutting as far down as I can possibly cut. As far down as I can cut. Don't worry about it. People worry, I should leave a little bit. Don't. A lot of the stuff that's written in gardening books about what we should leave and what we should do over the winter is still harking back to the first books that were written when the colonists came over here and had absolutely no idea how to handle the winter. None. I mean, the way of gauging the weather temperature is based on the coldest possible winter in Europe, which is 0, which is what? 32. You know? We have it a lot colder than that, and they didn't know what to do, so they made up all these rules about what to do in the winter, like burying your yew hedge, tipping the plant over and burying it underneath leaves and stuff. Yew hedges, but they didn't know what was going to happen. So I've cut to where there's nothing left on that liatris. And I leave up the sturdy plants. My kids are now 45, you know. But when they were little, somebody stopped by the garden one day. We weren't there, and we've always told people, you can come walk around, go ahead. The kids were out there, and they were walking around, so they asked my kids, they said, why does your mom leave that stuff up? And my son very quickly answered, if it hurts to fall on it, Mom leaves it up. I thought, wow, that's a terrible thing that they didn't know that your kids are saying, but that's the way that it is. If it's going to stand up by itself, it has the potential to look nice in the winter, so leave it up in your first pass through. Turtlehead, which is still blooming, usually into November. It's still blooming right now, and it's a great plant for our native bumblebees, is still up there when Susan's closing the garden. And in the winter, it's going to turn that coppery color, which can look good against other things, and is also, as stubble up, especially in conjunction with grasses, is a place where our native solitary bees often spend the winter, at the base of those clumps of plants. I don't cut a lot of things down in our yard because we have a great butterfly garden. We're nurturing a lot of different species of butterflies, and those chrysalises that overwinter are often in those dense places with thick stems. However they know the caterpillar is the way to go. Because those are stems from the turtle head in the pot of my snowman there. But if it's not going to look good, clematis look like unstuffed mattresses in the wintertime. And they can be cut all the way down. All the clematises can be cut all the way down. Don't get hung up on this bit with, which way do I cut this one, which way do I? You can cut all of them. And then watch what they do afterwards and say, oh, that's good. This is the late clematis that blooms in July anyway, and it blooms on new wood. That's all new stuff, and it's all gone. The trellis itself is prettier. So the sedums tend to stand up pretty well, and the peony doesn't. The what they call ornamental basil, but it's not basil, perilla in the foreground here, can go. The yucca can stay. It's a good marker for where's the end of the driveway. Don't drive into the driveway. If it's blooming, people get, especially those who have pollinator gardens, say, but the bees are still on it. Well, leave it up then. This is perennial ageratum. It's still blooming. The bees are all over it. When it gets killed back, it just falls down to the ground. Because we have that option of saying, okay, Veronica, we'll leave the last few flowers up. Or cut the last few flowers, stick them in a vase, put them on your porch. They'll come to those flowers. It's kind of fun to watch. But decide for yourself about what looks good or what will look good, because the books say things like, oh, rose hips are so beautiful in the winter. I don't know. Myself, I have a love-hate relationship with roses. They're so needy. Hydrangeas can look nice in the wintertime. Snow can sit on those. I have a client who well, I'm retired now, but she's still a client of sorts. She goes out in the fall and she paints the tops. She uses a spray paint and paints them orange for Halloween. And then she comes out and paints them red and silver for Christmas. And I can't tell you how many times that I'd be working at the yard and somebody driving by would slow down and ask me, working the garden, what is that bush that blooms red in the wintertime? Some of the stone crops, the sedum that's called autumn joy, I grew up with it as a kid, not a new plant, stands up real nicely, holds the snow nicely. Some of the sedums fall apart. So it's going to be what's in your garden and how it's grown that it works really well. Some of the plants that they say, oh, you should leave it up, the birds like the seeds of the Rudbeckia. And the seeds of the Rudbeckia are vicious weeds. I mean, they come up everywhere. You get an acre of Rudbeckia if you leave up the seeds. Some of them, if you want to really grow Russian sage to where it looks good, it used to be called Perovskia, now it's a salvia. Go out to Nevada. Admire it in Nevada and Utah, where it's a shrub and it stands up. Here in Michigan, all it wants to do is lay along the ground and look ridiculous in the wintertime. I've been told that blackberry lily looks good. I have one client who just loved the blackberry lilies, but they don't open until quite late in the fall. And by then, they don't have company around them and the stems are falling over. The pods aren't open. And I have to take sticks that I've cut from elsewhere and prop them up so that they'll open. And there they are. The blackberry lilies are opening now on that plant as the fall ends. And I leave things that are still looking good. So the Japanese anemone in this garden and the hibiscus are still blooming. So they can stay up. Enjoy them. That's why I put them there. Our obedient plant, which is not obedient at all, but does bloom late in the year. Phloxes, if you deadhead them, they're still going to come back and bloom again in Indian summer, so you can take the tall phlox. Butterfly bush, I just deadheaded in my own garden yesterday because the butterflies, some of them are still out there. The late guys are still out there. The perennial geraniums that are still blooming. Japanese wax bell, which waits until now to open up big yellow bells that hang from a 3-foot plant. Toad lilies just blooming, unless their deer have eaten it down to nothing. Ironweed has just opened up. This is our native Vernonia or ironweed. This one's called iron butterfly. For those of you of my persuasion with music, iron butterfly you plant near dark side of the moon astilbe, and the two of them together, you can put your headphones on and just kind of ignore what everybody's going to say. The turtle head is still blooming. The seed pods on a lot of things, like the false Solomon seal, look really nice. So you make your own decision. And when I'm cutting with hand pruners, it lets me get close to the plants and see what's going on. Because at the base of the plants, if I use a weed whip to trim these, or a string trimmer to trim them down, I'm not going to see that there's a dandelion growing in the middle of that hosta. I'm not going to see that, and that's going to keep growing right through to the winter. If there's weeds growing in the middle and I'm close enough to see them, I leave that plant uncut so that when I weed, I come back by and go, why did I leave you up? I must have left you up because there's something in you. Because there next to that hosta that I've cut down, there's 2 red stems and green leaf, and we'll revisit those later, but those are pokeweeds and buckthorn, which are going to grow, and there's a weed is a plant growing in a place where it's not wanted. This is a sedum that has in its crown a brunera. They're both desirable plants, but not growing on top of each other. So watch for those things as you're cutting down. Everything in every case that I can, every place that I can try to, I keep all of the debris. Goes into the wheelbarrow, goes to a composter, goes to a shredder. So I've taken the peony down in among the stone crop, the sedum that I showed you earlier, because peony is subject to botrytis blight, pretty bad disease that when I cut it down, I want to cut the peonies down early enough in the fall that the stems are still white and solid. If the stems are gotten to the point where they're getting hollow or they're discolored, then the botrytis has likely gone down the xylem stems and is in the root or the crown of the plant and is decaying parts at the bottom, and worse, becoming a spore that's going to reinfect it as it comes up the next year. So if I know that a plant has a disease and has a problem with the disease, I'm going to take that debris and make sure that it gets hot composted or sent to a hot compost. All the rest of the stuff is worth keeping because although there's bad stuff in it, people say, the books say get rid of the diseases and pests that are in your garden by getting rid of all the debris. Yeah, there's aphids that are going to overwinter. Aren't these guys cute? Look, same aphid, 2 different colors because these were more exposed to the cold, and just like the leaves in the fall, they're turning color. But they're going to be sitting there over the winter. But with them, right in the same group, can you see this guy? That's not a spider. That's an aphid that's been infested. It's been, the egg of a parasitic wasp has been laid inside of it and is developing and is going to eat that aphid and emerge and eat and lay its eggs in other aphids. So you get both the good and the bad that you're keeping. If you've got a system working, if you've got an ecosystem working, keep the pieces of the ecosystem together. Don't go throwing everything out. I bundle things now because I can't, it's a lot of debris if you've got a big garden. I bundle things and put the bundles on the downwind side of my yard to catch leaves that are blowing across, because I do have neighbors who get upset that I'm keeping the leaves. I have one neighbor who gives me all his leaves. I put them on a tarp and drag them across because that way he saves yard waste bags. But every time I drag the leaves out of his yard, he would say, I don't want these back. I said, Gary, you are upwind of me anyway. I'm going to get your leaves. You're not going to get mine, but I'll make sure you don't get them back. So I put bundles of the stuff that has the good and the bad, fungi, bacteria, insects, you name it. I put them on the downwind side and let the leaves bank up against there. And some of the stuff that you cut down you can use for pretty things. Japanese maples that are out in the open should be protected in the wintertime. And a lot of people do things where they'll put burlap around them, or they'll go to the extremes that the Japanese do in their gardens and wrap rice paper around and bind them up carefully. What we did is with this Japanese maple, which was exposed at my mother-in-law's house, but she loved it, south-facing house, brick wall, hot area, bad place for a Japanese maple in the winter. we're protecting the trunk by shading it with a grass. We've cut down a grass elsewhere and put all of the stems of the grass, we threaded them down through the tree and wrapped them around the trunk of the tree. And as the maple loses its leaves, then it becomes a grass sitting out there. After I've cut things down, then I rake up. Not to take the mulch out of the garden, but just to get things so I can see. Because what you've done by cutting down is expose the bare ground. You can see the weeds, you can see what you're doing, and that's what comes next. So I can see the flowers that are left there, and I can see the weeds, the unwanted plants that are right there growing next to the coreopsis is that Nigella love in a mist, which is a wonderful plant, but also a pushy plant. Back to those weeds that were left by the host, or those poke weeds, if I leave them there right by the crown of the plant, that plant is still growing, leafless or not. That red that's there is full of anthocyanin. It was green. As it gets cold, the plant converts some of the chemicals into anthocyanin, which is a great antifreeze. And that's one of the reasons we see red in fall leaves, is the plant is protecting itself as it finishes doing what it's doing. So even without leaves, that plant is photosynthesizing. And that root, that's a seedling, but so is this a seedling. That's going to be much bigger next year because it's photosynthesizing at great rate all through the fall and all through the early spring before you get out there. And it's going to be right up against the crown of your plant, hard to get out and take over. This is where people lose gardens and lose lawns on a regular basis, is by ignoring the weeds in the fall. When I'm raking up, I use a metal tine rake, not bamboo tines. This one is expandable, so I can change the width of the rake. It's not as good for doing leaves off of the lawn, but it's good for getting between plants. So you might want to take a look at those. They're inexpensive, and most of the garden centers have them. After I've raked things out of the way, and while I've got that bare ground in front of me, if I'm going to fertilize, that's the time to fertilize. If I fertilize now, at this point in the process, and in the fall, I'm doing what nature does, which is drop a lot of things on the ground to gradually decompose until next spring. And if I put fertilizer down, I'm picking a fertilizer, and I know this is Michigan State. I wish U of M had soil testing labs, but they don't. Michigan State's test, which is a very good buy for your money, their report said that you need 3 pounds of nitrogen, 4 pounds of phosphorus, and 4.5 pounds of potassium on your garden. So that means you're looking for a 3-4-4 fertilizer. So I'm trying to match the fertilizer to what actually is needed out there. And all fertilizer by law has to be labeled with the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium needs. The things you're looking for in the fall, though, are things that say water-insoluble nitrogen, carbon-based forms of nitrogen, because what you want to do is put something on the ground that's gradually going to break down and gradually get into your plants, not get washed out in the fall rains. Washington State did a study, this is years ago now, but it's been upheld and been reproduced several times. They used fish, and they pretended they were bears. Rip the stomach out of the fish, throw the fish up on shore, grab another salmon, show it up on shore. They did that in the forested areas along a river and looked at the nitrogen source. They marked the nitrogen in the fish. I'm not sure how they do that, some kind of carbon dating, carbon marking. And by December, 50% of the nitrogen that had been in the fish was in the wood of the plants. So these plants are not doing nothing in what we call the dormant season. They're taking things up. 90% of the nitrogen was in those plants by the next April. And that's what you really want to do, is use a slow-release nitrogen source like that, a natural source. And that does make a difference. Your perennials, which includes your lawn, is much better off if it's given a slow-release fertilizer done the way nature does it. So get a soil test done. If you don't have a soil test, then just use a fertilizer with balanced numbers, 222, 555. And as much as you can do, use slow release. And most gardeners that I know hate math, absolutely. I call it fertilizer phobia. They will not figure it out. But if I know that I need to have a pound of nitrogen for every 1,000 square feet, because that's what my soil test told me, or because that's standard for twice a year application, then I can look at that 13% nitrogen and say 13 times the 3.5 pounds in the bag, this is enough for 500 square feet. Or if you don't want to do that yourself, that's one of the things we put up on the website, is a spreadsheet where you can read different fertilizers and their source and how much they will cover. Or you can type in your own fertilizer that you've got, how big is the bag and what's the numbers on the bag, and it'll tell you how much it'll cover. You shouldn't waste fertilizer. And I don't worry about precision. If I'm using slow release fertilizer, it's not going to burn anything. Brush it off of the leaves of evergreens if you're using a granular fertilizer, but otherwise let it go. In the next couple of steps that you do outside in the fall, the fertilizer gets mixed in without you having to do anything extra. So I'm using one of the Espoma products here, and if you look at the brown that's behind me, you'll see there's quite a bit on the ground. It's more than you think. Most of the time people are putting way too little fertilizer. Don't waste the time. Don't waste the effort. Put enough on to really make a difference to the plants. And now I'm going to weed, and I'm going to edge, and I'm going to walk in the garden, and that's going to mix the fertilizer in. Then the next thing that you do, and this is what you do if you've got limited time or you've got people that are going to help you, you say, what have I done already? Don't bother messing with other stuff. Don't even worry about how it's going to look in the winter. Clean up the edge. Weeds begin on the edge. The edge of the lawn becomes a weed into the bed. The bed itself becomes a weed in the lawn. Clean the edge up first. And that's what I do next. So along the edge of my son's garden here, I was working last fall, I'm cutting the edge with a spade, or you can use a half-moon edger. I prefer a spade, a sharp spade, because I can then push the soil up into the garden and loosen the soil deeper. And sharp makes a difference. If you haven't sharpened your tools, sharpen your tools. None of us are getting younger. One of my clients told me one spring, why didn't we do this last fall when we were younger and in better shape? You know what? That works no matter how old you are, or no matter what season it is. We all need sharper tools, and most of the things gardeners are doing is cutting. We're hoeing, we're weeding, we're digging. All of that is cutting, and a sharp edge makes a difference. Shovels, spades, this one is a spade. Isn't it stupid that the rectangular one is called a spade and the one that looks like a spade on the deck of cards is called a shovel? But they come without a sharp edge. I have talked to a number of tool suppliers about why is that? They say, we don't know why that is, but they come not sharpened. And you would think new would make a difference. So sharpen the edge. I'm cutting. I cut for about 10 feet along the edge. I'm not making the garden bigger. I'm just cutting along the same edge that was there before where things have crawled into the garden. I push down on the handle, and that pushes the blade up and loosens what I'm going to weed out of there, because I want to take the things that have grown into there out with all of their roots attached. It's not unusual for grass to grow 12, 18 inches into a garden over the winter when we're not looking at it. And as I pick up that stuff that I've just cut, if it snaps, then I take a fork and loosen and chase the roots further in. People tell me that junipers are not a good ground cover because grass gets into them. I said that's because you let the grass get in. I've seen people go and pull the grass out of a juniper, and they're pulling the grass out. I go, you might as well just get a goat and tether it out here and let it keep eating that grass, because unless you cut it off from the source that it's coming from, it's going to keep growing under there. So you want to clean the edge off first. And after I've pulled things out, I throw the extra soil back up into the garden because I want to leave that edge open over the winter time. That air, that trench, is as good a root barrier as plastic or stone is. So if I leave that edge, it's going to fill in over time. Gravity and erosion is going to take things down into it. But if I leave it open, it gets me way ahead of the game. So I'm going to go along the edge, and my edge is now clean, and I have weeded most of what's going to happen to the garden or to the lawn or to the ground cover area by weeding the edge. I've weeded 12, 18 inches into the bed usually. The rest of the stuff I get to do later. And if you've got a penchant for edging, you want to put in an edge and not have to cut an edge, then put an edge in or clean the edge up now. There is an edge here in Mildred's garden. I'm cleaning up the garden in the fall. You can see up there the black. But things had grown over it. They don't go through it, they lap over the top and root. So find the edging in the fall. Even if you've got edging in, it's going to keep the roots from climbing in underneath, but it's not going to stop the things that grow over the top. And if you have edging, if you're going to put edging in, which is a good idea if your beds are set, it's one of the best things you can do for yourself. Put the edging in straight up and down, which means you don't force it into the ground. You dig a trench and line the trench with the edge, and as straight up and down to the plane of the ground as you can do, as perpendicular to the plane of the ground as you can do. The tendency when you're cutting a trench like that to put edging in is your spade is going to be angled. Don't let it angle. Go ahead and cut the trench and then slice that trench so that it's straight up and down with the plane of the ground. Because those of you who sew, you know that you can't press a seam open unless you clip it. And so when when that edging tries to go around the curve, it can't go around the curve if the curve is also bending backwards. It's going to leave a gap, and that gap is going to fill with water and freeze and thaw and push your edging up. So don't do that. I use carpet runner rather than edging in most cases because I don't like the black line. I'm trying to put edging as deep as the running roots are going of whatever I'm trying to keep out or in. And grass, for the most part, grows 3 or 4 inches deep as much as the roots are going to run. The running roots, not just all of the roots, but the roots that are running. And that's deep enough if you're using that black plastic edging. That works. But a lot of the weeds I'm trying to keep out, my lawn, for instance, is field mowed short. It's everything. And there's thistle out there, there's milkweed out there, there's all kinds of things out there. I need a deeper edge. So I take carpet runner, the stuff that you buy to keep the hallway carpet from wearing out in heavy traffic places. It comes 27 inches wide. You take a razor blade and just cut down and cut it into whatever depth you need. I'm lining a trench where I've put in a drain tile here, and I don't want to be cutting that edge every year because the drain tile's right there. I don't want to cut into my drain tile, so I'm going to put an edging in there. And that's edging a rain garden in Birmingham. Then I go into the bed. Then I go looking for the stuff that probably bothered you because you noticed there was a big dandelion in there, and I have to tell myself while I'm doing the earlier steps, stay away from the dandelion, get the edge down first, get the edge done first, get the edge done first. So I go into the garden looking for things like this Pennsylvania pellitory is growing right in the middle of the spirea. It's a different color green. You've seen these things while you were cutting down, or you see the color as you're working along. And I believe it was Patton who said something while he was in the desert in Africa about how Rommel, he had to think like Rommel, he had to be like Rommel, he had to understand his enemy to really get to him. You gotta respect the weeds and know them to know what they can do. This is quackgrass, and every piece of that white root that you leave in the ground can grow. One of my clients, the same one who was gonna be younger every year, took a piece of quackgrass and put it in his compost pile because he was a retired scientist, and he measured it after a day, and it had grown 12 inches in a day. And he thought, well, that can't be. So he put a ribbon around it and put it back in, and it grew 15 inches the next day. The top part of a plant, this part here, might be anywhere between 20 and 5% solid, and the rest is moisture. The root is 40 and 50% solid. So every inch of root can grow many inches of green if you leave it in the ground. So I have a great respect for quackgrass. And I love the gardeners who, when they're coming over to talk to me, and I've been crawling around in the garden, who understand when I can turn around and say, look what I got out! You know, 18 inches of root. And on some of them, you know that the root on quackgrass is strong enough that I can keep loosening with a fork and trace the root out, whereas Canada thistle is brittle, and I've got to loosen the area much more or I'll snap the root off. So learn those things about it and get a good weeding tool. The good tools are the tools that are best for you. I like to use the little Dutch hand hose that are sharp enough that I can cut off seedlings, or I can turn the longer end of the triangle into the ground and use it as a pry to pry out the deeper weeds. And the deeper weeds are ones that I also respect. This is nut sedge, which is called nut sedge because it grows from a little bulblet, that nut. And there are people who say, oh, I've been digging and digging and trying to get rid of the nut sedge, and I got the nut. I said, well, that nut is producing a runner that has other nuts on it. So when I'm weeding in the fall, I am marking places that I call weed hotspots. I know that I left some stuff in here. I know that the first thing in the spring, while it's still cold out and I'm still wandering around, I'm going to go out and get all evil villain laughing kind of stuff at saying, I got it. I got that guy before it came up, before it even began to get green, because those have been photosynthesizing. Even underground, when they're green, that little bit of green is making millions of molecules of sugar in a minute. And that's making more starch and making more stuff come up. So respect your weeds. Respect bindweed. I have never beaten bindweed, but I know I have gotten it under control in some places by beating it back to where it's coming from, and I know that every year, if I check right there and get it as it comes up, it's not going to spread elsewhere, because it's got a long running root. That's hedge bindweed or field bindweed. Great bindweed is even worse. The Native Americans called it man underground because it could be 6 feet down. As big around as your leg would be the storage organ. That's going to come for a long time. I use a fork to weed in the beds. This is another thing that mixes the fertilizer in. A fork is a great thing to have because you can put your weight onto 4 small points here's where we need the math people again. I'm putting more pounds per square inch on each of those points than you do on the blade of a spade. And I'm putting more pounds per square inch than a bulldozer does when I'm putting in a fork in the ground. And they're used everywhere. This is at Bath Botanical Gardens in England. They were forking the ground and taking out weeds in the fall. Okay, and then with the beds cut down, now you can see what's been hiding all winter, because I couldn't see them in there, but I can once they're cut. I call it lifting the skirts. Anything you left out there, lift the skirts and find the width, the thistle growing underneath your mums. And even the good plants, this is Amsonia, a beautiful blue star plant, blue in the spring, gold in the fall. But it's got its own seedlings underneath it, and you don't need another 5 4-foot plants out there. And I'm correcting trouble. I am right now assessing my own garden. We moved 7 years ago. Our house kept flooding, and we had to leave a 39-year-old garden to get a new place. So I'm 7 years into redesigning gardens, and we've put in a lot of ground covers because those can take care of themselves. But I'm reassessing some of the ground covers because some of them are just too much of a bully. Ostrich fern is too much of a bully. It's, if I take out the ostrich fern, this ostrich fern, I need to trace that root out to this one. I can't just go for this one because then I'll miss this piece that's coming out and not come up yet. So no, that's not the kind of stuff I want to have. And I don't want gooseneck loosestrife. Gooseneck loosestrife, when I went to weed it out at a client's garden, I went, okay, what are these white roots? Well, I'll be darned, those white roots are attached to the gooseneck loosestrife, and all of that is in one place, and all of that is going to be that many more plants next year. So you're assessing which ones you want to say, I don't want to use that one anymore. Bee balm is a much nicer plant to have for spreading around. And you're looking, as you're looking down into the crowns of plants, at things that are getting bad in the middle because the oldest parts of the plants get bad. Same thing with your lawn. You get bad spots. Center oldest part you cut out. Cut it out of the iris, cut it out of the lawn. Hostas should be solid. When their center is open, that's because the center got old and the center needs to be cut out. It's a terrible thing to say to a retirees association. I'm sorry. Okay. And they get to where they're not making leaves anymore before they totally die out. Sometimes when you're looking as you're cutting things down, you learn about new stuff. Monkshood, which blooms in the fall, has the same kind of problem as botrytis, where the fungus will come down the stem and infect the root. And then the tuber for the next year is infected. So you want to find the firm ones and leave them and take out the ones that are bad. Or correct the drainage. At the Detroit Zoo, it's all sandy soil, and all the gardeners there feel that, well, everything is fine. The problem in Diane's garden was the drainage. If you filled a hole with water, 18 inches deep, doesn't matter how wide, but 18 inches deep, fill it with water. If it's not emptied in 24 hours, your drainage isn't good enough and your plants are going to fall over and things are going to die. And that's daisy roots, arm's length down, daisy roots there. They all stopped like a laser level at the bottom of the hole. The bottom 3 inches, there were no roots because the bottom 3 inches has been sitting in water. Just like a pot in the house with house plants that's not got a drainage hole in it. So take a look as you're digging, dig a hole and take a look at where the roots are. And look for compaction areas, the places where people cut across the corners. Probably there are retired architects here. I'm sorry, but some of you landscape architects are so impractical. Nobody is going to walk this way and do a right angle turn and go that way. Everybody is going to cut the corner. You know, and gardeners should not plant there, but you got to loosen that up. Even dog traffic, dog paws compact the soil in places like that, so you can loosen it up now. Then I start dividing and transplanting and rearranging. This is the time to share plants with people and decide what to put where. Get rid of the ostrich fern, for instance, because it's too much of a bully. And you can divide and make plants. You don't have to spend an incredible amount of money. I tell people, just dig it up and take a look at the root. If you look at the root and whether it's got a tap root like a carrot, whether it's got a running root like a Japanese anemone, whether it's a woody plant like sage, you'll be able to tell how to just slice them up. I buy plants. Here we got this new garden, and I want to replicate a 39-year-old garden. I buy one plant, put it in place. If it does well, the next fall, I dig it up, divide it into pieces. One plant that I'm thinking of right now, the native called green and gold, that I'm using as a ground cover. I divided in after its first year in the ground, I divided it into 22 pieces, 17 of which made it, and are now covering a whole big area. And you do that in the fall, the plant has 2 cool seasons in a row to grow before it has to handle a summer without as many roots. So do it now in the fall. And that means you take a perennial geranium out of the ground, And when I tell people I'm a gardener, they always imagine, a floppy hat and white gloves and Martha Stewarting around the garden, When really what you're doing as a gardener is you're digging up these big things that you need to ask the grandkids to come over and help you with, right? Because you got to knock the soil off to get it down to that one piece can cover a huge area the next year. If you can't split a plant apart yourself, borrow somebody's fork, put 2 forks in it into the lawn, and push the handles apart, and it'll pull it apart like it's big, strong fingers. And then you've got small daylilies that cover a big area. If you've got hard-packed soil, most people call hard-packed soil clay. It might be sand and be hard-packed. Leave it rough. Where you're digging and weeding and whatever, leave it rough and tumble. When you put a mulch on top of it, you've now got more surface area for microbes to work on over the winter and freeze and thaw to work on over the winter, and it improves your soil. So I leave it rough. If it was hard-packed soil, then pop it up and leave it real rough. And at this point now, as you're moving things around, put them out at the end of the driveway if you've got enough garden already, okay? Put them at the end of the driveway with a sign that says free perennials, and let people take them, or at the end of the week you can put them in the compost or put them in the yard waste bag. We all make too much garden. Betty had enlarged her garden over the years. I was cleaning up in the fall as the blue mist flower is blooming. I'm cleaning up. I said, we just took out all of that weedy daisy that was over here and never looked good. And Betty's asking what to put in it. I said, Betty, can we put nothing in there? Could we just put nothing in there? In fact, could we take out, you've got plenty of blue mist flower. Could we just take out that strip that you enlarged and that you're now not able to take care of yourself? Can we contract the garden a little bit? Because you don't need that part right there. Think about doing that more, because most of us are volunteers at one place or another. We can always have a big garden that we're part of someplace else. We don't need a bigger garden at home. And I write a lot about this because for years I've been understanding that this is coming. And then bulbs can go in, bare root perennials can go in. I call these like presents to yourself. This is a piece of a peony, a piece of what's called an intersectional peony, a cross between the tree peonies and the regular peonies. They're great peonies to have. And I'm putting it, that's one division, which is a plenty big enough thing. I put it into a wide hole. It's sitting on top of a mound of dirt. I take small bulbs, species tulips and various little alliums, scatter them in the hole, cover the whole thing up. It's like Christmas next spring when that stuff comes up. And then step back and take a look at it. Does it look like this? Then you needed to have more things that were sturdy and you could leave up over the wintertime, because that's depressing. What you want to do is add some shrubs and trees, add some evergreen ground covers. At Lee and Ted's, we added these 3 plants: the Japanese maple, the Hinoki false cypress, and the Coster blue spruce, the dwarf blue spruce. Those 3 things in a triangle, looking out the family room window. Doesn't matter what else is with them or how much bare space is there. In Audrey's garden, once we cut down the peonies and the hostas and the other things that are there, we're left with the boxwood, the smoke bush in the background, and the evergreen ground cover, and the rocks. Rocks count too. Sedums, all you need is 1 clump of sedum to be interesting. You can have lots of space in the wintertime, because wintertime is when things get expansive and we can enjoy the view further out. Walking around in people's gardens in the fall, you notice a cardinal red twig dogwood with those beautiful glowing orange stems. It gives you something. You say, I'm going to put one of those in, and I'm going to take out some of those daisies or delphiniums that take lots of work to take care of. As I closed up the garden one winter and was looking at our yucca, which I put in the ground because a neighbor gave it to me, and it lived for a whole year above the ground without dying back, and I thought, well, I guess you deserve to live. But I don't like yuccas that much. My husband tells me that the world is divided down a solid line between people that like yuccas and people who think they have a good name. But I have the yuccas, and my other winter interest is this sculpture that holds up some plants. It's a support for plants, but it's also a sculpture in the wintertime. And those 2 were too much of a straight line to the neighbor's downspout for me. I needed some interest over here. So in the wintertime, I've got a snowman. You can barely see him there. And I want to go forward. There we go. Food coloring and water. Winter interest. And by the way, he's wearing a U of M cap, which you can't really tell. But my son and his family, who every year take at least 1 picture like this, wanted me to make sure that I said that we say go blue in the garden on a regular basis, and you can have blue in the garden. So do it. Have fun doing it. And then you mulch everything. Now this is when you either let the leaves fall down or you get some mulch to put on. A cubic yard is enough to cover 200 square feet really nicely in the fall. And that's 5 or 6 big wheelbarrows or 14 bags. What you want to do is make your gardens, make it so that they don't need mulch over time. Again, at my son's house, some blue rug junipers. This is his blue and gold garden. He doesn't realize that, but it's his blue and gold garden. Blue rug juniper and gold sedum are the ground covers in there. We had lots of flowers for years. The grandkids liked them. But the idea was to have that rug juniper fill in so that I don't need that wheelbarrow full of mulch over there. And we've got a mulch calculator on my website too, because people don't know what's going on with that, where you can either fill in your square footage and how deep and whether the bed has a lot of bare space or is closely planted, how deep you want it to be, and get the numbers calculated for you of how much mulch you need. Or you can fill in the second and third parts of the worksheet, and your numbers will pop up in these orange squares. So you can put in your beds and how big they are, and it'll figure for you if it's 8 feet across and how deep you want it to be, and whether or not it's bare or full. Okay, if the days are still warm, and we're now at the point where it changes. If the days are still warm, we put the mulch between plants because we don't want to encourage rot on the crowns of plants that are still green. But once the days are cool, and we're at that point now, 50s and 60s, go ahead and cover the plants. It's the easiest time to mulch. You can throw the mulch for years. 3 decades, I would go in and the crew was there and I'd say, don't throw the mulch, don't throw the mulch, stop throwing the mulch, because the mulch always banks up against the plants. But this time of year, you can throw the mulch. And I put 3 or 4 inches of some kind of mulch or more. This is the neighbor's leaves I'm dragging over. And if you look, that's almost an knee deep. And that's what it looked like the next spring. It decomposes. If you've got an active working garden, it decomposes, it's going to be gone. It doesn't hurt the plants to be covered in the fall. That happens in nature anyway. When I put all those leaves on, I then, because it's usually by the time I'm working in my own garden, it's the end of October, even the beginning of November, I put all kinds of other stuff in there too. Chop up the pumpkins and throw them in. It's a good potassium source if you need potassium in your garden. And I throw all that stuff on, it's gone. By spring, you don't see that at all. And because the neighbor doesn't want his leaves back, just because for his benefit, I take a fine mulch and I just throw a little bit on top so that there's a little bit, I say there, it's holding it down. It holds down by itself. If it's an active working soil, the fungal threads hold those leaves together. There's air and water in there. Everything decomposes and becomes a nice garden for the spring. I use grass clippings, I use shredded leaves, I use shredded perennials, I use the neighbor's tree that they took down, anything I can get a hold of. I like the fine textured dark stuff. This is called processed bark. That's lawn clips. That's leaves at Indiana Purdue's Master Gardener demonstration garden. That's leftover holiday decorations at Chris's garden. This is everything shredded that he could shred, that one of my clients would shred, that his neighbors called him the shreddingest man they'd ever seen. That's shredded perennials. That's your own compost shredded up, decays real rapidly. Compost, if you have a compost source, buy compost in bags and put it on. Does the city yard still make and let you pick up compost? Because we used to pick up truckloads of compost here when I was working for people in Ann Arbor. Don't use the colored mulches. Even if you're one of the people who likes these different colors, don't use the colored mulches. This is hardwood, this is pallets shredded up and then dyed, and those pallets are dried. They're not the same as putting wood chips on because they've been dried. They have like 0 moisture in them. They're not going to rot in any quick order, and the dye from them runs out. They become gray and nasty looking, plus the dye gets onto your pavement that's nearby. So don't use those. You can see the runoff that's going on with it, even at the landscape supply. So go for the fine textured stuff. I can tell you that in Tennessee and Virginia, they envy us that we have processed bark in Michigan because we've got so many red pine lumbering operations chipping off the mulch. And don't do this. Please don't do this. If it's meant for winter interest, it should be able to handle the winter. This is one of those things that, I don't know if that's me. I don't know if this is one of those things that people are dying to get into the cemetery. But if the burlap touches the plant, then the salt touches the plant. So if you're going to wrap something, don't do this. Do you believe they did that? Do you believe they did that? Don't touch the plant. Try to make it pretty because it's there. Oop, I'm cut off. Don't put if you're going to put burlap out to protect a plant that you're afraid is going to be windburned, don't let the burlap touch the plant. And better yet, think about putting something out that can handle the winter because we're going to look at it until springtime, and that's not very pretty. Then you sit back and enjoy. Just look at what's there, learn more. There are great bulletins about what leaves contribute, and great evaluations from botanical gardens on which plants are best to put out there. And maybe if you get on it right now, when you can put on one pair of long johns and your working pants and go out there like I was yesterday, maybe you'll have time to have fun at Halloween and carve up some pumpkins and do something kind of fun with them. Okay, are there questions that we have to answer? Are there any questions in the room?
Actually, we have one question because we're really tight.
Over time, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
But Janet,
My email address is on the pages that you have there. Please send me your questions because we answer everything we get. When I was writing for the Detroit News, we got 11,000 questions over 13 years, and we answered every one of them because every one of them was a learning opportunity.
right, and if you did not get a handout, all the information is online. So